Welcome to the inaugural edition of Voices, presented by Serendip Art and Ravi Kavle, in collaboration with the Hashtag Collective, of which I'm a founder member. We have curated Voices as a year-long series once a month to investigate the creative present through conversations between artists and arts writers. We are, in a sense, borrowing from curator art theorist Nicolas Bourriaud, who coined the term relational aesthetics to describe the art based on human relations and their social context. He positioned artists as facilitators and regarded art as information exchange between the artist and the viewers, as we are doing with Voices. For us then, Voices is an extremely important collaborative artwork between Ravi, Hashtag, the artists and art writers featured, and all of you, the audience, where the medium of the artwork is the generous sharing of conversation and ideas. Our present continuous is a surreal and disruptive time. We seek to present and archive Voices as a critical historical snapshot of the now, positioned within the larger journeys of the artists, with context set by the art writers in conversation with them. A word about the Hashtag Collective, which was formed by Biju Kuriakose, Abin Chowdhury, Saira Biju, and myself, as a platform for exploring such multidisciplinary interventions, provisional propositions, and site-specific installations to create greater public engagement with art and the issues of our times. We have strong individual practices, but come together from time to time to brainstorm. We believe very strongly in the power and necessity of conversations and collaboration in the arts. Speaking of collaboration, it brings me to a rather visionary collaborator, Ravi Kavle. Former industrialist Ravi Kavle is an art collector and supporter of the arts from Bengaluru, who set up Serendip Art as a gallery by appointment to showcase contemporary artworks. He has sponsored the Ananya Drishya program that is helmed by eminent artist S.G. Vasudev and is a curator with the Alliance Française de Bengaluru for the Young Talents program. Before I ask Ravi to introduce the speakers tonight, a quick word about tonight's program. We invite you to please post your questions and whom they are directed to in the chat box, both in the Zoom and YouTube platforms. After the main session between Shanthamani and Lina, we will try and answer as many as we can. Over to you, Ravi.
Thanks so much, Parvati. Welcome, everyone. It's really nice to be here with all of you this wonderful Friday evening. And we're trying to make sense of the COVID crisis that is all around us. We thought this would cheer us up a little bit. Let me introduce Shanthamani Muddaiah works in sculptural and installation art that explores carbon and its byproducts as a main area of interest, while she also delves on the relationship between man and natural resources like coal, cinders, wood, charcoal, and bamboo. She has exhibited extensively in India and abroad at museums and Biennales, has done an artist residency at the Cite Internationale des Arts, Paris in 2017. And her work can be found in important collections in India and abroad. Shanthamani's studio on the edges of a lake is located near Bengaluru. Lina Vincent, whom I've known for a long time, of course, Shanti I know for 15 years. Lina I know for 10, 12 years, and she has also worked with me when I had my gallery Serendip, and we had done a print show. Lina is an independent art historian and curator with 2 decades of involvement in arts management, the art scene curating, solo and group shows, and multidisciplinary projects. She is committed to socially engaged practices that reflect in the multidisciplinary projects she has developed and participated in. The focus areas of her research include arts education, printmaking, history, and practice, the documentation of living traditions, and environmental consciousness in the arts. Lina has curated numerous exhibitions with galleries across India. Lina currently resides in Goa. So that's it. I think we should start off with the presentation that everybody is waiting for.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you so much. And good evening, Shanti. Good evening, Shanti, and good evening to all of you who are present here. To begin with, I think that a big thank you goes out to Ravi Kavale, Serendipart, and the hashtag collective for, in fact, making this platform possible for all of us. Because as Ravi said, I think we are all thirsting for these conversations. We are thirsting for being together. And even if it's virtual, I think it's wonderful. And to begin this conversation for me with Shanthamani is, of course, special because we have been having these conversations over many years, conversations full of life and learning. So Shanti, to actually begin with the entire conversation today, you have been in Bangalore, living in Bangalore city for many years now. And your interaction with the city has been such that it has fed into your artistic practice and your expressions in many different ways, the tangible and intangible layers of the city. So I want to ask you first, in fact, to speak about this relationship you have with the city and how it has impacted your work over the years.
Thank you, Lina. And I thank Ravi Kavale and hashtag collectives for this initiative. I think this is a great decision that you both took to bring people together and bridge this gap that is happening. Because during the lockdown, we really felt completely isolated. There are many institutions that would speak, but there was no platform for individual to say what was happening, artists to really say what they're going through. So this is an amazing platform. I'm sure many artists will unfold their journey and what they're going through at this point of time. Answering Lina, I've been having conversation with Lina for a very long time now. I came to Bangalore in 1993 with suitcase full of clothes and 1 degree certificate, So I came with this kind of determination to make myself whatever the worth to with limited skills that I had. Bangalore was close to Mysore, where I was born and brought up. So I thought I understand its culture and then I can do something here. I witnessed Bangalore from the time when Bangalore was very quiet and a garden city and kind of transforming itself to becoming a kind of an IT city. So I've gone through this, phases of Bangalore that changed the way the city works, that changed the way people interact with each other. So I'm somebody who actually looked at it, and strangely, when we came, we had not many cultural platforms to practice and kind of show who we are, or to say that there are group of artists who, contemporary practicing artists here in Bangalore. So it became all the more important to really question what kind of role we will play within this society. And what do we do with our work? Are we going to be stuck in our small makeshift studios, or are we going to go out there to really, tell the community that we can play various roles that are important to create a dialogue? So initially I did a series of group shows, kind of collaborative shows with 8 to 10 artists, where we really picked up issues and worked with it, where we could use the exhibition space as a platform to bring in communities, writers, musicians, dancers together. So we had even exhibitions where the dancers danced in the exhibition space. And that became a very important aspect for me to understand the kind of role I would play with my artwork. Thereafter, I really felt when the when the shift was happening in Bangalore city, when it became really very highly dense IT, corridor, I felt that the city was changing, in a very rapid way. I felt the need to really document. That is when actually with group of artists, I went out to document the city roads and talking to people, trying to understand what they are going through, what it means for them to have a city that has got such a big global attention towards it. What actually such a city that is kind of overlapping onto an existing landscape, what does it do, is something that became very important. So I've done almost 2 years of that kind of documentation. So I have a lot of photographs of Bangalore, and I also have, I think I have around 10,000, photographs of Bangalore city during 2008 and between 2006 and 2008. And I have at least another 30 hours of video footage of people talking from various communities, various kind of professions, people on the street, trying to say what it means to live in such a rapid changing city. So that was very important understanding for me so in a way, Bangalore not only gave me a place to stay and work, but it gave an immense opportunity for me to kind of understand the politics of growth, or so-called development. What happens to a developing country when you bring in development in an artificial way or a forceful way? What actually impacts? This is something that I could understand. So I have this particular slide where Suresh Jairam is also there. He was one among us when we were doing the photograph. But when I look back during the show, which I did in MAP, Past Continuous, I looked back into this archive material, and the landscape is completely changed. Bangalore has nothing that it doesn't resemble anything that was there between 2006 and 8. It's amazing how quickly things have changed. So Bangalore is almost like a microcosmic study of the kind of development that is brought into all developing countries. What happens to communities? What happens to cultures? How this kind of cultural landscape kind of transforms itself into 24/7 working space, and also the entire debate about how do we bring development? Is it something that is encompassing all kinds of communities and people who are living? But what do we forego? It is definitely culture. It is nothing to do. The economy, we always look at development from the economic module. We don't look at from the cultural module or environmental module. This is the time we lost 40,000 trees. These 2 years when we were documenting, we lost 40,000 trees in Bangalore landscape just to connect all the areas to airport.
My gosh.
That is, so my work was about understanding this and understanding this whole transformation that was happening around us. Therefore, everything that I do till today, is coming from this experience and understanding of the city, including the material like charcoal coming out of this particular experience. Because first time I heard the IT community telling me they were burnt out. This is something that I had never heard before, So this sort of things was coming from the community, and that's what actually I picked up to make my art.
Oh, yes. And in fact, really, it makes sense, because every time you did an exhibition, there was this intense engagement and understanding of your environment and the people that you were looking at. Speaking about material, Shanti, as a sculptor, as you said, this relationship of yours with material and the physicality of it has been immensely strong over the years. And, I do remember, of course, you have explored the human body extensively in many different forms. Later on, of course, carbon became something that was very prominent in much of your practice over the last several years. And I want to ask you, actually, when did this moment of engagement with carbon begin? Though, of course, you just spoke about it. When did that engagement begin? And how do you work in a practical and conceptual sense with that medium? I mean, do speak about the other materials that you have used and how you came upon carbon.
Yeah, for me, I realized very early, I'm trained as a painter. So I also realized as I worked that I am very much somebody who responds to tactile surfaces more. And therefore I started working with paper pulp and mixing that with pigment and almost sculpting on the surface, on the painterly surface. And gradually that I think my instinct were more towards physicality, and I'll tell you why physicality. Probably I've sort of come to kind of an understanding. And if you look at this slide, you will see that there is a installation called fluid fragments. This is the body, and then you walk through the body. It's a layers of body. It's I think 6 feet by 19 feet long, and you walk through, and it's paper and watercolor basically. And it's kind of installed in a way that you are invited to walk through the body. Usually as a painter, you always have work on the wall, and you have this gaze, and this gaze was problematic for me. And I thought, if I invite somebody to walk through me, and what do I actually engage with? What do I show to people, and what do I talk to them? Was an experiment that I didn't had any plan when I started the work. The only experience I had was 1 week of spending in MRI center, looking at layers and the way their body is kind of sliced and looked through it. And this is the journey that I took into. And I kind of looked at from the cosmetic industry, the way culture looks at, literature and culture and religion looks at female body. And then I invited, so that's how I painted the elements. But this is a kind of a point where I decided that I really need to understand paper making. I went to Glasgow in 2004. I learned basic paper making, and I came back doing a lot of paper sculptural kind of work. And this is my own body torso sculpted, and then in paper, and I started working with it. My experience of being in Glasgow was that I understood that no matter what I do, my body is actually communicating constantly. It's communicating where I come from. And the minute people think that you come from India, there are things that they'll tell you that as if they understood the region. It's not you, it is about the region. They believe, okay, somebody come and say Goa is great, which has nothing to do with me. Or somebody will say, oh, you took over my job, you're from Bangalore. So this sort of things made me realize my body, no matter what, communicates the kind of culture and geography that I come from. And I had this kind of immense liberation to kind of take that as mine and work with, So I started working that on the body. And I started stitching it, making it. This is a way I kind of got into making sculpture. But for me, I realized I'm a very physical person. I really need to, one reason probably because I've grown up in a very middle class, 80s Mysore, middle class family. And for you as a woman growing up is always about hiding behind a curtain. It is not about you being out there. Your physical presence is something that needs to be hidden. And for me, rejecting that meant really asserting my physical body. And that is only way, I felt the only way I could do it was using my body to make the work and using my hands. And that's why I make large scale work, because I move when I work. And then that's how I kind of got into making sculptural work. And for me, interesting part of charcoal was 1995, first time I used charcoal, because I thought few of us again went out to meet people who were riot affected. First time in 1995, there was riots in Bangalore. And I met a woman who was completely pregnant and her house was burnt. She couldn't really even go to hospital in case if there was a delivery situation arrives. But we were very naive and we just spoke to her and we understood what the situation and left. And it haunted me for a very long time. And I made this sculpture because her house was burnt and there was no place to go. And she stood on the road against the sunset when I was leaving. And that remained in my head. And I made first attempt in 95 to make that sculpture out of charcoal. But once I came back from, Glasgow, knowing how to use paper, I realized that I can sandwich paper and charcoal together. But I also heard a lot of debate about carbon in the atmosphere and what it can do, and the whole environmental issue debated during my stay in Glasgow. I was really thinking that the only material that is around me to talk about this situation was charcoal. That is what is available for us in the Indian landscape. Charcoal is still used for cooking in majority of rural India. And the fascinating part was paper is also part of the tree, and then it goes through another process to become something that is so malleable. And wood goes through burning and exhaustion to become charcoal. It is completely fragmented. It's neither tree, it's neither life or ash. It's in between. And that was a great metaphor for me to use to talk about situation that we are in Bangalore when it is becoming denser. That's how I started using it.
Right. But it must be like quite a complex process. Now, I remember having conversations with you about the number of trials and errors that you had to face, I think, before you reached a point where you were completely in control of placing the shards.
True. It was a very accidental thing. I was, usually when you go to paper making course, they'll teach you how to, sandwich a cloth or a, thread or flowers. And this is typical. You look at Gandhi Ashram paper, you have all these flower petals embedded into it. So this is something that you go through. Embedding photographs and textile is something that you go through while you're learning paper making. For me, suddenly I realized that paper has such a capacity when it's still in a fibrous stage that it can hold even something that is heavier. And, initially I started doing very small works where you put paper, we put charcoal into the mold, and then you pour the pulp and press it. So the pulp goes into every nook and corner of that gaps of the charcoal and it holds it together. But once it sort of dries up, it becomes a very dense material. It's very interesting that nothing happens to it. Till now, I have no complaints with charcoal work where it is damaged or it's falling off or something, except one or two, which is I made very early. Those works are with my friends, and I know that.
All right.
Yeah, first one or two sculptures had an issue. Otherwise, yes, I've managed to come to a space where I can create a very dense, compact material. But I also, any material that I use has to be related to carbon and carbon issue. So I've tried using bamboo. I'll tell you later how I connect bamboo and charcoal. I've used graphite to work with. I've used cinder. So it's everything that is connected to issues of carbon and environment. So that's the way I work.
I mean, talking about large scale, I think that, yes, this is the perfect slide for this. Turning back actually almost a decade, I think, or more, I remember visiting your older studio and seeing this wonderful and, absolutely awesome piece of work, which was so gigantic. And in many ways for me, when I heard also of your work with the Ganga, and how it is like the backbone of the entire, northern plains. And then this work, which was the backbone, a metaphorical backbone, which spoke of so many different layers, I think. I would like to draw your memories and thoughts then to this process and to this particular work. And how, in fact, this idea of these metaphors and multi-layered meanings appear in several of your works, this included.
I think by 2010, I probably had a certain kind of a limitation towards what I was doing with charcoal, probably. And I was looking at, and I suddenly happened to be in front of Ganga. And then we had a conversation with a friend of mine, an artist friend of mine, and we were talking how amazing it would be to actually travel the entire length and breadth of Ganga and to understand what this resource means. And we came back and somehow started to talk to people. And the first support came from a few friends of mine from Paris, who said, okay, here is the money, go, explore. And then Heba Foundation just said a check to me and said, if you can make a dent out there, go and make it, do it. So that was amazing gesture from both sisters and the belief. I did the journey with another 2 artists and the entire Ganga. It was in the middle of Ganges, especially in Bihar and West Bengal, especially by the time it comes to West Bengal, Ganga is almost 7 kilometers from bank to bank. So you really live few days without really seeing people and anything but water. But in this, when you're traversing between this meandering river with this high bank of pure gold like sand, it really feels like that it is the backbone that is in the middle of, in middle of this space. And for me, the metaphor was not only the way it sustained 5 major states of the country, but it is also the way Ganges is something that is kind of spiritual. It also kind of supports spiritually the entire country, no matter where we live. When you do this, housewarming, you will do that Ganga Puja. You bring in the auspicious water into the house. So the way it has affected, not only that, even people have carried Ganges all over the world and they keep it with them as sacred water. So she goes beyond her, the boundaries. And it's amazing to look at how people have actually contemplated the kind of philosophy that we believe today on the banks of these rivers. So that is amazing to look, and that is an understanding that I could only get being there, meeting people, traveling on that particular, fluid surface. So that's how I decided to make this backbone. But then I also wanted to make the work during that particular show only with material that we saw on the banks of Ganga. We didn't want to bring anything artificially introducing into that dialogue. We really wanted to talk from the contemporary point, what kind of issues are there from the river's perspective in terms of people and culture and all of that. So we worked only with the material that was available, like, whether it's camphor or ash or charcoal, that is how we brought in that material. For me, layering is very important in the work. And then synthesizing between the content and the material is another very important aspect. So I really worked few years to bring that together and make it work. Yeah.
Oh, really splendid. And then ultimately it also
then I was
showed at
invited.
the Kochi, at the Biennale.
Yeah. Basically, once I was invited and reading what Jitish had written as a curatorial note, I felt this would really work with it. But the challenge was it's going to be outdoor. And I needed to bring in a material that works with all weather, but at the same time, something that doesn't compromise my integrity towards my concept and the form. So I realized that I found cinder. Cinder is basically exhausted, burnt waste from coal. And it is just dead matter. There is no use to it. Only the architects use it to kind of fill in the, especially the bathroom cavities so that it is lighter as a material. So I decided to use that with the cement backing. And this work is around 72 feet long. And I think it is around 2.5 tons. Yeah. So this is when actually I got into making work outdoor. And for me, the very important understanding of putting this work in Muzris was the way an artwork works in an outdoor space and the way it works in the site is very different than somebody walking into the gallery. The way it kind of facilitates, whether intentionally or very casually, for people to hang around, and then the culture that happens around it, the kind of reasons for people to hang around it, or it becomes a pretext to be there. And that is a very interesting and a very dynamic aspect that I really wanted to carry further. Thereafter, I've actually done few public artwork after this experience. Yeah.
Yes. and also touch, I must say, because, the aspect of touching that particular piece was so prominent, and people and children and adults and everyone wanted to be as close as possible to
True.
put their hands on it and understand what is this wonderful thing.
I
So,
went,
yes.
I went in the middle once when the Kochi Mozris was happening, and they were blind school students, and they were offered this work to actually understand. So it was another sight to see them how they actually kind of experienced the work. And I also saw a children's magazine where this work was made into embossed surface, and so you can actually feel the surface. It was a very interesting how the work lives you and takes its own, it becomes its own and as a way of reaching to people and gets different way interpreted. It's amazing. The journey is interesting for me. That it lives you and it lives the reasons why you made, and then it becomes something on its own.
Right. I think that really, I mean, it has been quite incredible to see the manner in which this whole idea of the socio-political commentary and the economy and the culture and all these sublayers come together in your work. Of course, you did mention bamboo already, and you have been also directing your work towards the exploration of bamboo now for some time. So, you have done work in India and also abroad, I think, in France. So, what is it about bamboo now? Now we spoke about carbon, but what is it about bamboo that has attracted you so much?
Oh, it came to me very accidentally. During one of the show in Paris, the director of in.The, the design school there, and she invited us to visit the college. And then when I was there, she said, "Will you do a workshop with our children?" And I agreed to do it. And I was very thrilled to see, what kind of experience that would be, to be with completely from students from completely from different culture and how do they understand. But the professor who was supposed to interact with me, Mark Tebu, he came to India and he met me here. And he said, we want you to come and work with us, but you have to use bamboo. I felt all kinds of things, what do they think? They'll call you and then they'll put you there and they kind of dictate what should be done, and I'm not going to accept it and all of that. But his second time, he insisted that I should work with bamboo, and he explained to me because bamboo is usually looked very vertically and horizontally because it's very fibrous material. Unless you have weaving, very thin strands of it that you weave into it. He wanted artists who will look at it from the very organic way, and he felt that I would be able to do that. So thereafter, I really needed to understand what bamboo is and how does it connect to my work. And I went through a whole lot of research, and I understood bamboo is one of the very interesting material at this point of time for architects and also designers. And this school being a design school, which has got architecture as one of the department, they are very interested in it. And I understood why they are interested in it, because it grows within 4 years. It doesn't really need much of resource to grow, in a sense, the water and the thing. It also increases 40% of oxygen around wherever it is growing. It has got a stencil, strength more than iron to sometimes. And then the important aspect for me was bamboo can burn into very high temperature, and it has got only 2% of ash, waste product, that is happening because of silica in it. And bamboo also can bend in heat because of silica in it. The other biggest interest in the world is because of the extract of ethanol, and that is way forward. So countries that cannot even grow bamboo, that they are interested in acclimatizing this particular, plant, grass and making it work. For me, the very interesting aspect was that the charcoal part of it. And then the charcoal, that is actually the burnt carbon powder of bamboo, is what we use because it has less ash content in it for all the filtration. So we only talk about carbon from the negative point of, with the carbon monoxide and the way carbon dioxide and the way it kind of affects the atmosphere and all of that. But at the same time, the carbon also can be a filter. They use carbon filters for air, cleaning of air and water. So there is this kind of other extreme that I get to understand. And thereafter, I started working with bamboo and to bring it into art as a material. Yeah.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm just
the
going to interrupt
previous
here for
work.
just a moment, Lina and Shanti,
Yeah.
because I have a couple of questions sent to me on the mobile saying, could you give us a sense of scale? You know, people
Okay.
are not
Sorry.
quite
Yes.
able to understand what the
Go
scale of
back
the bamboo
to
works
slides.
are.
Yeah. Can we go back to slides? So this particular work is around 6.5 feet height and 6.5 feet wide, and another 6 to 7 feet long. So and it's around 7 fragments, segments together, and it's just bamboo burnt and kind of fixed with polyurethane so that it doesn't really smell or anything.
Yeah, that's
And this work is also 6.5 feet tall, and the base, what you see, is also around 6.5 feet wide. But this whole concept was actually like an ink drop falling onto the floor. So that splatter, that is what I wanted to explore. The idea was basically to see how I can bend bamboo and make it work, that lyrical aspect of it that is coming. Important influence for me here was Belur Halebi temple, because we've been seeing these temples, and the temple and the intricate carving is something that you don't see anywhere else in the world. The way the kind of sophistication that these stone carvers have achieved during that particular period, it's right around us. And studying in art school at the time of modernity was such an important aspect. You somehow don't look at these. Even if you're fascinated, you don't know how to bring that into your work and dialogue with it. And here I felt that this is the time that I really need to look at it. It doesn't intimidate you if it's decorative or it is lyrical. And I wanted to really take that aspect of decorative element, and then I took that basic element of S that is there in the most of the stone carving, and I took that S and I created these patterns in that particular sculpture. Yeah.
right, and it continues also your engagement
There
with
are
an external space.
Yeah, some of the opportunities to make these work in a large scale for outdoor came in, and I was very interested because I really wanted to see. I really feel public art is one of the very important aspect of practice for us, because it feels and it is in a democratic space. It is a space where people get to engage with an artwork, especially contemporary.
Yeah.
Get a contemporary artwork in a public space where people will interact, where you get to have people, 50 to 60,000 people in a day, kind of passing this, and the kind of impact that will have in the long run as memory and nostalgia, as culture and belonging to a certain kind of space. That is something that I really wanted to explore and have that work in those kind of spaces to dialogue. And I took these opportunities to make these works.
Yes.
They are in Bangalore.
Could we please have the slide, the stone sculpture again on screen? That, I think, Shanti, was the last time we met in a physical space, when you were in fact completing this sculpture in stone. And this is one element that has been revisited, I think, in your work several times. The gestures, this sort of symbol of the community, of the voice of the person. The hands that became absent because of the IT, the entire IT boom that sort of took over mechanically what labor was doing.
No, I thought IT was invisible hand and voices working. So there were millions of hands. They're quietly working where you really don't see. And this is actually in an IT corridor. So it is a tribute to these working hands, basically.
Yeah.
And, this work is around 8 feet long and I think 3.5 feet wide. Each hand is 8 feet long and 3.5 feet wide. And probably it weighs, after the carving, around 8.5 tons. Yeah.
Oh, those sound like such huge numbers. But going back again to this idea of being together in a physical space, and now, of course, we're talking over the virtual, space. It has been the pandemic period in the past 1.5 year. We have all been isolated, and I think there have been various different kinds of contemplations about how does one carry on with a creative journey. Is it possible to continue? What is the meaning of producing work, or making art during a time like this? So among all these complexities and these different phases, what has been your personal experience, and in what ways have you sort of dealt with it?
Oh, I had a very different kind of an experience. Just before the pandemic, I got a very minor accident.
Your accident, yeah.
I had my hand going into the machine, and I lost 1 inch of my index finger. But that was not a big issue because I was promised that it will be reconstructed. So I went through a huge series of 5 surgeries, and it was in the middle, just in the beginning of pandemic. The worst was they grafted the bone from my hip bone, and then they infected me. So,
Wow.
during the first lockdown, I had this open wound, and the aspect of being, and they didn't want it to stitch because they wanted the entire in case of infection to be drained out naturally. So this wound took 3-4 months to kind of heal on its own and recover itself up. So it was like another metaphor for what was actually happening out there, and I was actually experiencing it physically. And for me, what was in my mind during that particular time was about being suspended, that we were all suspended from the kind of activity we were doing, the kind of belief that we had about our own work, and our, the way we would go every day with that kind of commitment into our studios. That got suspended completely.
Yes.
So, in fact, I made a series of work that because I felt that I had to relate to the kind of work I do. And then I thought, since I was working with coal and carbon aspect, and I thought about mining and the way it gets blasted. And I had this conversation with few people, and it was in my mind, freshly in my mind. It was interesting that when you talk about open cast blast, the earth gets blasted into air, and these matters will be suspended for a few seconds before the gravity takes it down, So I felt that our situation was like that. So I actually, the first lockdown, I did a series of studies of this matter being suspended in the atmosphere. So I have this earth and coal and all of this suspended, and I have series of work with that. But what I felt was the horror that I heard, more than my own personal tragedies, the horror that I heard of people walking endlessly, people, making those decisions to walk thousands of kilometers with their children and their families and belongings, and the kind of series of things that happened around us, in a sense, the oxygen issues and all of that, the way we've been kind of. So I felt it was something that just didn't happen just because of pandemic, but these things were building up already, politically or socially, it was already building up. And this, just the virus facilitated this and to create. So there is kind of immense, kind of a shame that I felt, that despite of all of us talking and thinking that we are all somebody who can make impact or who can say something, and we have tools to communicate and make impact. But somehow we were all mute spectator to this whole thing that unfolded around us. We really couldn't do anything. And it feels like a big psychological wound that we don't know how to heal this.
No.
So I also feel that I have a responsibility to make work of this particular time, whatever happened around me, I need to make that work. And I know that means really bringing back human body again into my work. But I really feel that I need to do it. So I actually thinking of doing series of work that is in large scale, but it is actually bringing huge number of people into in a sculptural form. I am in the process of actually making those works. And I feel, yeah, it needs a big kind of production cost and all of that. I don't know how to bring that, but I want to do it. No matter what, I want to do that work.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is part of your upcoming plans then.
Yeah.
And what material are you going to be using when you're working?
I have some plan of doing something called Silent Warrior, because we initially, this is a gradual thing that I've observed, that we saw people protesting all over the world on the streets, central, occupying streets, public spaces, demanding things, asking for answers, and the kind of, then you also have people walking endlessly. You have, all of these are people being stripped of their identity, and their rights to the land and the rights to voice their opinion. There are so many issues that actually comes in. So the initial small scale work that I have done at this point, 24 figures, is made out of epoxy resin, but mostly they look like thermal imaging. They look like surveillance image, and that is the work that is just getting over. But I want to make large life-size work that will actually have this physical presence, and they occupy space. This pandemic means locking down, and we believe it's an elimination of physical activity. But I really believe it is nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with virtual taking over the physical activity. It is really preserving the physicality. That is why we are, being inside and trying to protect the body, trying to, safeguard it. So that's my belief, and that's how I want to reclaim that physical space through my work. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think everyone will be looking forward to it. One more thing that I was thinking of, Shanti, is that, among so much of your work, there is a very quiet sense of satire and humor that, creeps in. And I think that it's a very beautiful part of your work. And it sort of opens these doors for people to have different kinds of interpretations. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
I really surprised that you said that I have the sense of, I thought my work is too serious, and I always feel terrible about it, because usually the kind of comment I get is, oh, it's nice, but it's too dark, So,
no, I?
So for me, I think the satire probably is in the new set of work that is in the map show at the moment, because that is photo montage, where I really bring in the kind of extremes that comes together, and that things that kind of unfolds in the landscape, the extreme things that unfolds. I think there probably I kind of explored that.
But for me, the dollar bill and the idea of the wings in charcoal, it's like there is a subtle kind of understanding of this satire, which is this commentary. So for me, that has been a really prominent part. And of course, I do remember, there's the dollar bill, which was also fantastic.
So I was invited to do a solo show in Miami, and this was in 2010, and this is right just after the economy meltdown, and dollar was collapsing, and I really didn't want it to go to Miami to be an Indian artist. I really wanted to have some, no matter what you do, you still become an exotic thing to be, kind of experienced. And so I really wanted to go with something that actually can debate with them. So I can talk to them from the kind of imagery that they are used to and they're familiar with. So the kind of material and the concern that I have is something that can be understood globally. But at the same time, I wanted to kind of go to a platform as an artist who has a concern. It's a global concern. It's not that I am just an Indian artist doing something exotic.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, I do remember our engagement with at Max Muller Pawan, the whole idea of food and this amazing piece, which was the tongue. that so many people dialogued over, and that was some intense experience, really. This whole idea of the tongue, and how that in itself can create so many layers of narrative. How we understand food, how we understand sensation, how we understand the body, desire, everything. So,
by the way, I just want to say the work which is hanging from the top, that's not my work. And that work is,
right.
It's a view from the gallery. And it's an Italian artist. I can't remember his name.
Francesco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This thing is around 6 feet long, and it is standing in that 45-degree with this metal plate that is holding it together. For me, it was just to create this kind of uncertainty, that kind of the earth opening up and, kind of consuming you, or that kind of an thing that I had in mind. And it's also about greed. It's also about desire. It's also so.
Yeah, really. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next time I can curate with you, Shanti, and I hope that comes soon. I think that we have, in fact, reached the end of this part of the conversation. Parvati, if I could invite you onto the discussion panel, so maybe it could be opened out.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. That was, such an amazing conversation. I would like to invite Ravi Kable as well to join the panel of speakers. And one of the first questions that we have is directed to Shanti. And and the person wants to know, how do you choose your materials for a particular project? Is there, whether it's bamboo or carbon or paper mache, or indeed going back to painting, what drives that selection?
When it comes to work, my own work, definitely I would work with material that is connected with carbon, because at this point for me, that is a very important aspect. And I really want to see how I can push that boundary, dialoguing with the issue that carbon brings into. And the interesting aspect for me is that carbon just landed me into the middle of the entire politics of life. Whether it is, environment, whether it is economy, whether it is US election, talking about clean energy, or whether it is displacement, or, any of the aspect that we really today talk about, or today we're talking about the kind of scam, coal scam that is happening, or the heritage that is kind of getting caved in, because whatever that is, it brings me into the pulse of life. And therefore, it's also a journey of understanding. For me, making art is about really understanding the next complex way the life is there, and how it unfolds to me another way. And so for me, art has been a canvas of learning, and then kind of, it's my own personal growth of understanding the world I live in. Therefore, that material is not over for me, and it's very important. It is also something that allows me to understand and then to comment on it. And that commenting on that particular situation or a politics or anything is about how I can position myself. And that is truly empowering for me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Another question that's sort of interesting and sent to me is that, do we think, that is the hashtag collective, Ravi Kable, and this, do we think this conversation would have happened if the lockdown had not been there? So I'm going to ask Ravi to maybe offer his comments first, and then maybe move to you, Lina and Shanti. I think the question is, the lockdown is seen as this negative thing, which it is, unquestionably, but is something like voices a sort of silver lining to it?
Yeah. Actually, we are all put in this situation, and nobody ever thought that we would come to this kind of a pass. So it's a great question. I don't know if we would have had this kind of intimate dialogues just on the computer screen, and it makes us stop and pause and rethink our own lives and lifetimes and, what we have achieved or not, and, and what is the future. So I'm all for this kind of a dialogue, and I think we should take it forward with more such episodes. And thanks. Yeah.
Lina, what do you think? What do you think?
I think that, to add to what Mr. Kavale just said, that it's we really need more of these neutral platforms for sharing, for dialogue. And perhaps, we were like with Ananya Drishya, let's say, which is a platform that was bringing people together to have these conversations. And, a limited number of people used to be in the audience to engage. But what the beauty of this time is that we can have, 60, 100 or 500 people from across the globe engaging with each other at the same time. And
Correct.
I think that's something that really has come about because of the way we have rethought these times. And of course, because we're privileged enough to have internet connections and digital gadgets, I still do feel that there is a large part of the audience that is outside of this. But at least for us who are privileged, I think that this is really, this is an important way to keep in touch and continue our work.
Yeah, I know. I remember telling somebody, in a sense, the webinars, though there are many, they do reduce the carbon footprint. I remember that in connection with Shanti's work, that we are able to connect like this in Goa, in Bangalore, in Chennai, in a very intense and special way, without having to fly people around and to share this. And in a way, I think later when people look back at these times, perhaps the art webinar, not all of them, but certainly the notion of the art webinar would be seen as a result of these times. Another question to Shanti. It sort of says that it's very fast, I think it's from Suresh Jairam, who says he's been fascinated by your sharing of, the journey of locating the body and material, and wants to know whether in the context of this pandemic, how would you look at body and materials? Would it change?
No, I doubt whether, for me, that is what is important. It is like hanging on to something that in a desperation, when everything is around you is saying the body cannot function or body has a limitation, and I'm holding on to something that is physical. And because we all need to live, we all need to, whatever is happening out there, and we think that we can do a lot more things on the virtual space, and but there is something that has to physically move to even the life to work with. Therefore, I don't think I will change the way I look at material. Probably I will look at it much more intensely at this point of time, because life feels fragile, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
Another question to Shanti, and I know you have talked a lot about the 70-foot sculpture, but I think the person asking the question wants to know a little bit more about how do you actually deal with 72 feet of sculpture? I mean, were you using molds right through? How did you manage to work with it? And then what happens to the work? How do you store it? Do you hope a collector buys it? Or, do you have systems where you can store such works?
Oh. It's the working with large scale is very interesting, because it's just not you have a group of people who work with you. So it's a kind of a community dynamics that works when you do a large scale. You need all kinds of people, from structural engineer to people who will do masonry to breaking stone, or even somebody who will work and understand your idea and bring in that refinedness that you are expecting, because it's impossible for a single person to bring that in that kind of a scale. So it's a group, it's a community, and then of course we can't really afford to have that kind of community continuously, but it's interesting that people come together when you really have that kind of need. It's interesting, people, art community gears up, and there are people who will join you to work together. That is the interesting part. Most of the work that I've done large scale is in some location or the other already, except the backbone. The backbone is still with me in my studio. I honestly don't have places to kind of store it, but I don't know what will happen to it at this point. Yeah.
Yet another question to you, because it's related to what you've just said. Let me ask you that first. Saying, how do you sustain the thought process? You know, you've started a large work like this. How do you sustain the thought process, and does the idea stay intact by the end, or has it changed considerably from your original intent?
I don't know, it's fortunately, unfortunately, I have not gone to that stage at this point of time. Most of the time I've got to work with something that I've already made, because my basic practice is been with coal and paper and all of that. So I do practice, I constantly work in the studio. My studio practice never stops. So I have made works in the studio which gets translated later. So the intent and the whole concept, everything is already structured even before I make the large scale work. It will be really interesting where you can actually explore a material and then go along with the way the material leads you, which I have not done till today. Though each time when you use a material, it has its own advantage that you use to a certain extent. But interestingly, each material comes with its own background and its possibilities and what it can communicate. Definitely, I'm very conscious of it. I really bring it into the dialogue when I make that work. But completely going from not knowing to something that you are, like the way you arrive in a painting or you arrive in something which is malleable, and you start with something and arrive somewhere, that process has not happened in the large scale. And it is also too expensive. Economically, it's not affordable when you do something like that, to change that way. You literally have to plan everything before you get into it.
Right. Again, a question directed at all four of us, saying, you know, well, it said that I said that conversations are the raw material for the whole processes of voices, and that's why it's called voices. So what are some of the conversations that led to the process? Could Ravi, could Lina, could Shanti, and, you know, in the end, if there's time, I will share, you know, some of the conversations and some of the discoveries we made in the process of putting forth this episode. Shall we start with you, Lina, and then maybe go to Ravi and then Shanti?
Yeah.
I think that for me, it was really exciting to hear from Ravi first and then from you, Parvati, about this whole idea of bringing writers, curators, and artists together. Because there's nothing I like more than a studio visit. There's I think that my is my video stopping?
No, you're perfectly.
All right. So there's nothing I like more. And then when the idea came up that I could actually have a choice of speaking to some of my favorite artists, I was terribly thrilled. So about the conversation, I think what has been really nice about this particular process was, one is what I already mentioned. It's a very neutral space. We don't have any, you know, preordained agenda of what is to come out of it, except that we have to keep the conversation going. So for me, that's really nice. And the other thing is that these are conversations that can be documented for everyone to listen to. And for me, that also is something that is that's so important. Documenting this time, these connections that we have shared for ages, now with so many people, is something that I find of great value.
Ravi, anything you'd like to add?
It's been a very nice start, I think, because we wanted to kind of make it clear that it's a platform from South India. And we want to focus on artists in our region, you know, but at the same time, not neglecting the other parts of the country. But we want to give a thrust to things happening in the South. And, because we have so much talent, we have so many very well-established artists and all that, but somehow we are always neglected. And, so we thought this would start off a good dialogue between, that was the main thrust of the voices. And I hope it will make a difference in the long run. Yeah.
Shanti, anything you would like to?
Regarding voices, definitely, I know there's so much effort has been there from you, Parvati and Ravi and hashtag collectives to make this happen. And it's amazing that you all come together and had this belief to, start some program like this. Personally, where I felt that during the entire pandemic, because art is not essential, culture is not essential, where we are all kind of invisible at this point of time, and our practices and the way what we believe and what kind of culture we practice is completely invisible. These voices have no place at this point of time. And I felt the need really to have a space where artists can actually say what they're going through, what they are actually thinking, what kind of work they're doing. And this can become, and that kind of a platform can become later on a place where you can really look back to what happened during this time. And therefore, this particular platform is very important. I've been talking to many friends saying, create something where we can put things together, where people who are feeling this isolation as artists or creative people, they should be able to voice it somewhere, and their own desperation or their creativity, whatever it is. It's important that we have that platform. And thanks to you both that you've brought in this platform, and I hope this leads to that kind of re-examining later in years to come.
Yeah, I mean, I almost can't believe, Shanti, that you and I had conversations at Kochi Biennale standing outside, or Lina, when you come to curate my show in Chennai. It feels like another life and another normalcy. So I think, speaking for myself, I feel that in the sharing, there is, I think you are telling other artists that you're sharing an experience that you can't share face to face, and for artists to know that they're not alone. I think to be an artist is necessarily a solitary process in many ways, but we also need this community of sharing, of honest sharing, of saying, for each artist to share, your journey in the pandemic, your larger journey, and how this moment of time features within it. So yes, I think these conversations have been wonderful. And I think it also, for me personally, it's also given the incentive to pick up the phone and call Shanti and have this conversation, or with Lina. And I hope there will be many more like that. The questions are still coming, so I'm going to continue to ask them.
Yeah.
Well, this interesting one is to you, Shanti, and it sort of says, it refers to you saying that you felt like the exotic artist in Miami. And I think it wants you to unpack that notion a little bit, and mainly asking, is that something you feel always, that, you going from India to the West, there is a level of exoticism? And is it hard to be an artist rather than an exotic artist?
I'm very aware of you being consumed as somebody who's, an artist who is coming from a place which they look at with this fascination of yoga and mystery and then spirituality and all of that. And then despite of being very conscious and wanting to create a dialogue in a serious level, you still get to hear, oh, I understand your spirituality behind the work, or I understand the land you come from, this sort of thing. It's not about not negating that I'm an Indian artist, but it is really, as a contemporary artist, to create a dialogue in an equal sense on an issues that really have something to share and learn.
Yeah.
Not mystery. I'm not a mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. A question to Lina. What do you think is the role of the arts writer? Do you feel that there is enough work being done now in India to contextualize the work of artists in a much broader scale? And, given what Ravi said, what do you think of this, being applied to South India, where is one of the reasons that artists from the South aren't given the exposure that they perhaps should get? Is one of the reasons that there aren't enough arts writers from the South? Is that a reason? It's a two-part question, I suppose, Lina.
Yeah, that's quite a complex one, and something that we have to look at our entire art history towards to answer. But to put it very simply and from my own perspective, I think that we do definitely have a lack of art writing which is not only in the English language, but also in vernacular languages, which is a huge handicap and a huge gray area, which is something that, produces a lot of radiating problems, let's say, in the area of the cultural industry. So where are all the students who are studying art history and museology? Are they coming into these spaces? Are they being able to do this work? I don't know, because I myself don't find enough people who are doing this. And I think many more of us need to be putting our attention into documenting, into theorizing, into writing, into having these very engagements and interviews and conversations about what is happening in the arts. We do have a sensation of a north-south divide, and this has been there for decades. Our entire art history and nationalist identification of certain way of framing Indian art has separated the north and south, and I think that we can say that very clearly. And despite the fact that there have been such strong movements in the south, including Cholamandal and the Madras Art School, we somehow still lag behind. So I think that it is a multi-layered situation, but not one that we cannot address. I do definitely want to say that we need more people to be in this space of writing and curation and interpretation. And it shouldn't only be in English, it should be across all the languages that we have access to. And that's when we'll be able to make a much richer cultural ecosystem that's more equitable also.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lina. Since you mentioned Cholamandal, and we see our very, very favorite person, Vasu, in the audience, can I invite him also to be part of the panel of speakers? Please come on board, Vasu. Truthfully, you're an inspiration to all of us, and we're so delighted you're here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also Suresh Jairam. We've already seen your photograph in Shanti's pictures. So now if you're here and free, please join the conversation, Suresh.
I'd also like to call Ravi Kashi.
Is Ravi there?
Yeah.
He is there.
Oh, please come on, Ravi.
Splendid.
Yeah. Okay. So Lina is
actually a question that I can throw open to, to Vasu or to Ravi or Suresh if he's there, or indeed to any of you, saying, how important is it that art should address the present, that it should address current issues, which is what Voices is doing, really. It's using the current time, and it's kind of creating a snapshot, in this case, of Shanti's journey and what she's doing at this particular point, her reactions and her responses. And I think Lina's brought that out very beautifully. So, Vasu, Suresh, Shanti, Ravi, would you have, any thoughts on the relationship between the present continuous and art? Vasu? Hello?
You see, if you're a contemporary man or woman, your art has to be contemporary. there is no way of going back or going forward. It has to be presence. And I think what Shanti has been doing is very, very interesting. The way she uses material, the way she uses the forms, and very interesting. In fact, I must tell her that it took me back to one of the workshops which we had at Cholamandal, Arnava's Charities, which we run. And we had a workshop there, and Shanti came for that workshop, and she made charcoal was one of the subjects, which she took up very well. And then something was burning, and cloud formation and things like that. I think Shanti, you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
No, but what I'm saying is, I think if you are contemporary,
how mind works,
your art has to be contemporary.
Spelling, how mind works with spelling.
What way? What do you?
Like now we're thinking about spelling and words.
Not just spelling, but I'm also thinking.
How about you, Ravi? Are you there, Ravi Kashi? Ravi? I can't see him. Suresh?
I don't know whether you can see me, but I can.
No,
see
we
all
cannot
of
see you.
You, but now we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. It's nice to see all of you, but in the context of Shanti or even with others, I think it's fascinating to see the many journeys of artists in Bangalore where they've related to social issues, they're related to things that are personal, and they're also related to the city as a reference in their works. And many of them are still practicing. And I see that there is a very interesting contemporarity of their work, which locates the artists in the larger context of the present and the here and now. So I feel it's a very healthy and very progressive way of looking at the Bangalore art scene.
Thank you, Suresh. And I know that you do a lot to contribute to the scene. So thank you. Come work with us in Chennai as well sometime.
Sure. I'm going to come there next.
Yes. How about you, Shanti? Do you feel,
Yeah, this is something which is very integral debate. It is constant in our work, whether our work has to be contemporary or. The problem I feel is in India is that just not as an art practice, but as a culture practice, our belief the culture is somewhere else. It is nothing to do with us. We believe it is something very old and therefore it needs to be preserved. You cannot touch it. It's sacred. That becomes a problem for any contemporary practitioners. Whereas for me, art has nothing to do with just an isolated process. Art is whatever I do, it needs to be out there in society by end of the day, whether it is in negative way or positive way, whatever it is, it has to be out in the public space. That is when it becomes an artwork that and it fulfills its role. My constant puzzle is the community in Bangalore are the people who are an IT community, majority of them. They go all over the world. They see different kinds of cultures. They create new softwares that we believe that is taking us ahead of this particular time in this landscape. But when it comes to culture, what is the kind of culture these people have to have? By end of the day, what kind of culture do you consume when you have such a progressive way of working, living, and looking at the perspective of the world? Then what is that culture? That absence is the biggest problem, I feel. That when it comes to culture, you believe it is something old and traditional and that just need to be preserved or supported. It cannot be dynamically being out there, connecting with you, challenging you, questioning you, and making you think and answer it. That is something that is very important. Therefore, the kind of work that I make, if it's not relevant to me or for this particular day, I don't know whether it makes sense to anybody else. Therefore, I need to be in this contemporary space.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of excitement about this talk. I mean, I just would like to read out Hina Pari's message that she says she's very excited about voices and the intent. And Shanthamani, you continue to inspire with your thoughts and journeys. And today has been another opportunity. Thank you, team hashtag and Lina. And best wishes and looking forward to more of these. So I think that's very much our sentiment as well, that, you know, we'd like to foster these exchanges so that, you know, the arts community grows. You know, the artist should not be a voice crying in the wilderness. It should be a voice that is heard and responded to and engaged with in a multiplicity of ways. We're running short of time, so I'm going to sort of ask all of you, Vasu, Lina, Shanti, Ravi, Suresh, Biju, whom I see here, who is an architect and founder member of Hashtag Collective. Actually, shall I ask you, Biju, what is your takeaway from this conversation? Biju is an architect who does a lot between, Chennai and Bangalore, and has been very excited that we are organizing these talks. Biju, can we hear from you?
Well, I mean, we architects talk a lot, so we are always in. I think it's wonderful to see. I mean, I think Shanta, you brilliant. I was just talking to my friend Bijoy, and he said that he designed your.
Yes, he designed my studio.
Yes.
Your work is just fantastic. I mean, I think it's amazing conversation. All I want to say is that, we are living in very challenging times, and I'm not talking necessarily from the political standpoint. What I'm trying to say is that even, we are living in times where the patronage is, coming down more and more. And I think we need to kind of create an ecosystem. I'm not just, bringing in different art forms together, from different fields together, who are really kind of dependent on this patronage to kind of put our voice out there. And we are, in some sense, I often talk about practicing architecture today. It's in some sense an act of resistance, and we all want to kind of move forward and do things which kind of takes us to the future. But we are also in some sense a mirror, kind of constantly kind of showing that sort of, acting in resistance and being critique of the times that we live in. And hence, when we take things forward, we also need to be critical thinkers and kind of, constantly challenge and critique things, the way it is happening. And I think it's wonderful to hear the conversation today. Both Lina and Shanta, it's brilliant. I hope it continues, and look forward to have more conversations. And thank you, Ravi, for putting it all together. I think it's I mean, when I say patronage is dying, I'm not counting you in that. But wonderful to see everybody coming together.
So thanks, Biju. Yes, I have this studio, fantastic studio in front of a lake, and Biju Chandran designed it. And I'm really blessed. Every time I go there, I really forget that I live in Bangalore. If you come to Bangalore, please come visit.
Sure.
Lovely. Lina, any closing remarks that you would like to make?
I just hope that this will inspire many others also to support artists, also to bring artists, writers, and different sorts of practitioners together, because I think that we must take this opportunity to do this. And this is what we can do for ourselves and for the generations to come. So, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone, including the audience who has been, so active and so interested in everything. And thank you, Shanti. And yes, I hope this inspires a lot of people to begin the same.
Ravi, any closing remarks from you?
I would only say we've created a great bridge between Bangalore and Chennai, which I think was very essential, because we have a lot of these artist groups, which various, for various reasons, they're all, separated or whatever. We should bring things together, especially in the South, and then make it an all India this thing. So I think in that way, this has worked pretty well. I would say it is akin to the Setu Samudram project of Suresh and Tirtha Collective, where I went 10 years ago when Suresh was also there, and great memories of that. Yeah, great.
Shanti, anything that you would like to add?
It's a fantastic platform, for and I'm really touched that I've been asked to do the first one. It feels like that their care and nurturing is still there, and I really feel that warmth here at this point. Lina, Vasu, Suresh, Ravi Kavle, and in fact all of you been, it feels that I am in the middle of my friends and who cares for me. That's how I feel at this point of time. I hope this will continue, and there is a lot more dialogue that happens, which can engage other issues that are really important at this point, and which can result in other kinds of things, like probably writing around these, articulating around these issues, or bringing a publication or some. This can lead into that if it goes further. I hope. And
that's very much the hope. Yes, that that literally that this is the raw material for other connections, conversations, leading to other things in an organic way. And many of the subjects that you've all touched upon, the need for patronage. Thank you again, Ravi. The need for conversations, to feel that you are not alone in this, that there is a sense of community, there is a sense of support, is, I think, very necessary for the artist's psyche and for the work that is produced. It's, a larger, one's peers. I mean, first of all, you need your peers to be there to sort of help you and to receive the work. And Voices is a little step, I hope, towards that. As we are running short of time, I will, sort of now bring this to a close by saying many thanks to you, Shanti and Lina, for participating in Voices and taking us on this journey, both within and without the artist's studio, and through the materiality of this journey. A special word of thanks to Namrata, who's our unseen facilitator, and to Sarah. And from all of us at Voices, Ravi, Sarah, Abin, Biju, and myself, a huge thank you to each and every one of you in the audience for participating in this exchange of ideas. And you've become a critical part of this relational aesthetics of Voices. And I can't leave without saying that episode 2 of Voices will be there at the same time on the 6th of August, where artist Prashanta Shahu will be in conversation with arts writer Nalini Malviya. Do tune in. Until then, stay safe and keep the conversation going. Good night to all of you. Thank you.